Welcome to today's live demo of PsyArXiv preprints and Europe PMC. We will be today talking from both sides. So I'm Maria and I'll be representing Europe PMC with my colleague Michael, who might be answering your questions in the chat. And to represent PsyArXiv today with us is Jack Arnold, and he'll give introduction to that wonderful resource. Jack, would you like to go ahead and start us off? Sorry, before we do that, actually, just a short housekeeping point. We will be recording this webinar, so if you're not managing to see it today, you can get a recording later. And if you have any questions, please pop those in the chat and we'll have time for them at the end of the talk. All right, thank you very much, and to Jack.
Okay, perfect. Just want to give a brief introduction for those of you who are unfamiliar with PsyArXiv. So PsyArXiv is a paper repository for papers in psychology. It came out of a meeting for the Society for the Improvement of Psychological Science back in 2016. So I guess we've been around for 5 years now almost, and we've continued to grow. We hope, obviously, to share as much information as we can. So this really comes out of a need for openness and transparency, and that can happen in a lot of different ways. And the main approach for PsyArXiv is to help people share their work. And if we rely on the model of publication, there's going to be a lot of stuff behind paywalls or just have difficulty in disseminating that information. So that's our main goal. And as a service, folks can place whatever work they want to on PsyArXiv from the perspective of if you have a working paper that hasn't been published yet, but you want people to see it, to the point if you have a paper that's been published, but you want to provide a free alternative that individuals can access, all of that can go up on PsyArXiv. As I mentioned, we started in 2016. We're up to over 16,000 as of this morning, 16,000 distinct items on PsyArXiv. So they're going up there at a pretty rapid rate now. About 20 new manuscripts per day is the rate that we're currently at. Download rates of about 5,000 per day. The page views, if we look at 2019 going into 2020, an increase of almost 150%. So what we see is, even though there was a lot of buy-in at the beginning, we continue to grow pretty rapidly. So one of our goals now is actually to continue investing in partnerships with the goal, hopefully, of getting our information or getting the information of our users out to even more people. And so we're looking forward to partnerships like what we're about to hear from Europe PMC, and how individuals can access PsyArXiv from additional ways, right? Because the more eyeballs we get on different papers, the better off we are. So I will stop sharing there if we have a minute or two for questions at this point, and we're going to have some questions at the end if there are any dying questions at this point.
All right, any questions, folks? All right, I can't see any raised hands just at this point. So thank you, Jack, but hopefully we'll come back if anyone comes up with interesting questions at the end. And so allow me to switch back and share my screen. So I will be presenting actually live today, but I have prepared some slides in case anyone wants to come back and look at the examples that we've gone through. So if my colleague Michael could share the link to the slides in the chat. This is myself. I am community manager for Europe PMC, and I've put our contact details on the slide as well, in case you'll come back to us with queries after the webinar. So just to explain who we are and what we do, Europe PMC is a database of life science research publications. We're developed by the European Bioinformatics Institute, and we're a partner with PubMed Central, essentially participating as a network of full-text biomedical archives. We have 33 life science funders that have chosen us as their dedicated open access resource. And so we accept submissions from the authors funded by these organizations. But on top of that, we also provide literature research as a service to all researchers, regardless of whom they were funded by. We have different types of content in Europe PMC, as I've mentioned, more conventional peer-reviewed publications, but also preprints, documents, protocols, and books. And all of this is enriched with relevant resources that I'm going to be talking about today. So this is something that we try and do, is link publications or preprints with relevant things that are of interest to the life sciences community. Currently, Europe PMC indexes about 300,000 preprints from nearly 20 different preprint servers, including PsyArXiv, and they're enriched in all these different ways. And so I'd like to go ahead and just show you a few examples. So first, I'll go to some of the tabs that I've already opened. Here's Europe PMC website, and I've made a search for journal topic selectivity. And what I essentially wanted to show you is that preprints are already included in every search. So this is a two PsyArXiv preprints that pop up at the top of the search list. So Europe PMC provides eyeballs, even if people are not looking for preprints specifically, just because our search looks through all of the documents that are available here. So just to show another point, it is, however, possible to search more specifically for preprints from PsyArXiv, and for that you'd use this particular syntax called publisher. What is also interesting is if you would have a look here, there is a filter for preprints, and for those preprints that were later published as a journal publication in a peer-reviewed traditional setting. So if you were interested to, as Jack said, find articles that have been peer-reviewed, but that you can have free access through PsyArXiv, it is possible to do in this manner. It is possible in Europe PMC to combine searches for preprints with more advanced type searches, for example, using Boolean operators or particular fields, like if you wanted to limit your search to the title or abstract or particular article section and so on. So it is a nice tool to look through preprints more specifically and discover those that are of interest to you. Now, I'm not going to obviously cover any kind of pointers on search specifically, but if you're interested in that, again, Michael could share a few other trainings we've done and recorded, in particular on discovering preprints and other tips for search. But I think what is most important is that enriched view of the article, where you get a preprint together with all of the useful bits and pieces, such as community reviews or citation analysis and things like that. And so that's what I would like to really focus on today. This is an example of a PsyArXiv preprint. You can see the view in Europe PMC. It is the typical bibliographic information provided here. The preprint is labeled with a green label, also in search results, but we additionally provide a notification to say that it is a preprint and it may not have been peer-reviewed for audiences who are not familiar with the preprint concept. And of course, it's going to have the abstract laid out here and the link back to PsyArXiv for the full text. Now, one thing that you can do with Europe PMC is use the tools that we provide for preprints. And the first one is called Annotations, and that's an interesting one. So essentially what we do is we text mine together with a number of partners for interesting biological concepts and relations. And we identify these in abstracts and full text of different records, and we use them as a way to search through Europe PMC, but also to find them in text quickly. And so they kind of help you to scan article for concepts of interest. In this particular preprint, for example, there are some diseases identified in the text as well as chemicals, and we'll provide chemicals structures were available. Now, please ignore this notification. We very unfortunately for today had a bug, but actually this appears where licensing prevents us from doing more interesting things with these what we call annotated concepts. So I'm going to show it on a slightly different article. And so here, if you look at the annotations, and it's going to take a small moment to load them. What you can do is, for example, if you were interested to see a gene disease relationship that was found here, you can click on finding it and it will be highlighted in text and you will jump right to it. And so for things like that, it's quite neat system. And we hope that once the bug is fixed, you can actually do that with PsyArXiv preprints too. In addition to looking at annotations, you can, of course, cite a preprint, so you can save or export the preprint citation itself, and you can claim it to your ORCID. So for those who might not know what ORCID is, it's a unique identifier for academic authors, and you can essentially add it to your profile, building a literature list of the things that you've published and authored, and so Europe PMC gives you an opportunity to easily do that directly from the preprint record. Now, I've mentioned already in search results that there is a filter for journal published preprints, and we also provide a link to the journal article from the preprint itself in this notification bar, and you can go back and forth between the article and the preprint itself. So that allows you to see the latest version, as so to say, of the preprint. PsyArXiv also versions their preprints. Essentially, if authors provide any additional edits, they will create a new version, and we always display the newest one for PsyArXiv. But in cases where there might be a different way to handle this, you'll see preprint version history. So this is a Research Square preprint, a different preprint server, and so you can jump between them easily to see the previous version, as it were. Looking at the full text, that is something that I also wanted to share with you. So obviously we would link back to PsyArXiv, and that's the DOI back to the server site. But we also link to free open access legal copies via Unpaywall. And that's actually another beautiful example where the same will be true for the journal article. So if a preprint is identified as a journal article version, then Unpaywall will link back to it. And so it provides additional way to bring people to view the research that you've authored with PsyArXiv. Now, from Europe PMC perspective, for most of the preprints, we only index abstracts, but with the recent pandemic happening, we've taken a decision to index all full text for COVID preprints. And so we are hopefully going to do that with PsyArXiv preprints as well in the near future. But until then, I just wanted to show you how full text of a different preprint looks like. So here is, again, a Research Square preprint, and you can see that you could view the free full text directly here. The more important thing perhaps is that the full text is indexed, meaning it's part of the search. So when you search Europe PMC, the search terms are being found not only in the title, bibliographic information, and abstract, but also in the full text. And that means that preprints become more discoverable when the full text is available, because if someone is looking for a keyword that appears in introduction or, for example, in results or discussion, but isn't present in the abstract, those preprints will still be picked up. And that is an important point. So coming back to the kind of enrichments I was talking about. So for preprints, for example, we link to useful resources via our partners. So here an example is linking to altmetric for alternative metric details, things like preprints being mentioned in tweets, blogs, and so on. And quite interestingly, through our partnership with CiteAI, we can also find if the preprint has been cited in the literature and the type of the citation based on the citation context. So does this preprint, has this preprint been cited as a supporting reference, or is someone contrasting it with a citation that says we found something different? So you can see that, for example, this preprint has been mentioned in 6 different articles. 5 of them simply mention it, and 1 supports the findings of this science. But this is not all that is available, and this is just a slightly different example with a published article, but the same principle applies to preprints. So if we would identify citations of PsyArXiv preprints, we would create this neat graph of all the articles in Europe PMC that cited. We would also provide links to data citations, and I'll talk about that in a moment, or reviews if available. We would actually list the citing articles for the research in question, and provide links to other citations. So for example, this article has been cited in Wikipedia. Now, the data is another important point. And so let me briefly go to the data section. This article has been published in Cognition, and it contains supplemental materials and data citations to records in Figshare. So Figshare is a generic repository. And if, for example, authors would have some spreadsheets or recordings or questionnaires that they'd want to share, they might decide to put it there. And so what Europe PMC does is it identifies these data citations in the text and compiles them in the data section of the article. So the things that are under this black line over here, those are kind of generated by Europe PMC. They're not part of the article, but they're hopefully making it a bit easier to look at the evidence presented in the publication and examine it, as it were. So you can choose to go to the link in Figshare and then explore the content that the authors have put there. So here, for example, it's a script. Now, this is a slightly different example. And so if we look at the data here, this is more of a molecular biology publication. But if you were to look at publications that deal with those types of data, then there might be accessions mentioned in the text. So sort of data identifiers assigned by different databases. It might be protein structures, it might be electron microscopy pictures, and so on. And so those will be highlighted in the data behind the article section. And we will also provide links from curated databases that cited the article as a reference. So for example, this publication probably had some information about a model organism called Drosophila, and a fly-based database curated this article, extracted useful evidence, and then linked back to this publication. And so those will be highlighted in this section of the article. And that is available for preprints as well. There are actually, in fact, databases that curate preprints, and we hope to see more of them in the future. Another useful section that we compile is links to additional protocols and materials. And again, unfortunately, I'm showing this on a published article, but hopefully providers will continue to add preprints to their list. And there are 2 resources here, one that checks cell lines and another that provides additional information about immune epitopes. And again, you can just explore these. They're extending the article in a useful way. And finally, perhaps what is most useful for preprints is there are several providers that add community peer reviews for preprints. Publons is one of them. So this is a PsyArXiv preprint, you can see. And there is a peer review available from a provider called Publons, but there are others. And so you can go via this link and see what has been said about this particular preprint. And we hope to add more providers in the near future. So that is actually it on how preprints look in Europe. PsyArXiv preprints look in Europe PMC. So I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen, and we can actually go into questions. Let me go to the questions slide just so that we have a nice background. Do we have any questions to Jack or myself at this point? I can see one from Carrie in the chat that hasn't been answered yet. Is it possible to batch export search results to a reference manager? Yes. If you select Get Citations from the search, so maybe let me just quickly show this here since we're already there. You can, for instance, export citations in the format that you need. So there is a selection of results that you can make, and that of course works for all results, including preprints. Any other questions? All right, well, it seems like if we don't have any further questions, please feel free to contact myself or PsyArXiv with any follow-ups, and we will, as I mentioned, post this as a video for all those who couldn't share, who couldn't join us today. And yeah, thank you for your attention. Thank you, Jack, for sharing your contacts. Please make sure to follow up with us if there's anything else we can help you with. Brilliant. Thank you all so much, and have a lovely day.